Chukwuma returned to Nigeria at the end of May 1960, a well-trained young army officer, and he was posted to 1st Battalion in Enugu, where Major Aguiyi Ironsi was the second in command, under a British commanding officer. By convention, as a regular commissioned subaltern, Chukwuma should have taken precedence and had seniority over a British short-service commissioned national service officer of the same rank. But the company commander, a British captain, ruled otherwise and placed Chukwuma under an officer who should have been junior to him. Chukwuma refused to accept such blatant racial discrimination and wanted to assert his rights and see justice done. He complained to the adjutant, a British officer, but got no redress for himself and other Nigerian officers similarly treated. He went further to the second in command in the hope that a Nigerian officer would ensure that a fellow Nigerian officer got his due. Instead, he was referred to the army headquarters in Lagos and posted to 5th Battalion in Kaduna, where we met for the first time. We were both in the B Company. His non-acceptance of what he regarded as injustice in 1st Battalion was seen as showing excessive national sentiments and a sign of immaturity. This was reflected in a report on him in 1961 by Lieutenant Colonel Aguiyi Ironsi, who had also been posted to 5th Battalion as the commanding officer.
Lieutenant Nzeogwu first served under me in 1 Queen's Own Nigeria Regiment. He started off by showing unrestrained national feeling, which I now attribute to youthful indiscretion. He has since pulled himself up and seemed to have lost all ideas he may have had in 1 Queen's Own Nigerian Regiment. He works hard and has a clear understanding of his men. He is highly respected by his men, and he has a sense of loyalty to his superiors, be the British or Nigerians. His military knowledge is not extensive, but he is determined and the serious type who will improve given time and opportunity.
Before independence on 1st October 1960, the Nigerian government was requested by the United Nations to contribute troops for its peacekeeping operation in the Congo, now Zaire. 5th Battalion, by virtue of its performance in training and in internal security operations in the southern Cameroons earlier in the year, was earmarked for the first Nigerian contingent to be sent to the Congo. Preliminary reconnaissance reports had indicated that to be effective, the Nigerian contingent must be officered by Nigerians rather than the British, who were still many in the officer corps of the Nigerian Army. This led to a posting in of other Nigerian officers to join those of us who were already in the battalion, and the consequent posting out of some British officers. Among the Nigerian subalterns posted in were Lieutenants Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu, Henry Igboba, David Okafor, Folusho Shotomi, and Ray Matthew Dumuje as the first Nigerian quartermaster of the battalion. Senior Nigerian officers posted to the battalion included Captain Abogo Lagama and Major Zachary Malari, the latter as the commanding officer of B Company. Lieutenant Colonel Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi was appointed commanding officer of the battalion, while a British officer, Major Galloway, was appointed second in command. Other Nigerian officers in the battalion before the special posting of the Congos were Captains Hilary Njoku and Yakubu Pam, and Lieutenant Ugunewe and myself. The earmarking of 5th Battalion for the Congo and the substantial Nigerianization of the battalion was taken as a challenge by the all Nigerian officers in the army. Everybody, no matter his station and post, was ready to contribute his quota to the success of the battalion. The two most senior Nigerian officers then, Aguiyi Ironsi and Olusegun, who in other situations were seen as keen rivals, cooperated and worked together to prepare the plans and details for the movement of the battalion, although Olusegun, as second in command of 2nd Battalion in Kaduna, had nothing to do with the 5th Battalion. B Company of 5th Battalion, to which Chukwuma and I were posted, was the first Nigerian company to be fully Nigerianized. Our company commander, Major Malari, exuded confidence in bearing, was decisive in character and firm in decision making. He normally brooked no nonsense and thoroughly enjoyed his drink. Our second in command, Captain Lagama, was more reticent and easygoing than Malari. He was by no means less of a good officer, and like Malari, he also enjoyed his drink. The platoon commanders were Lieutenant David Okafor, Chukwuma Nzeogwu, and myself. By mid-October 1960, the company had fully restructured officer-wise. The company commander had received his briefing from the battalion commander and had summoned the first conference of his officers on 17th October 1960. Responsibilities and duties were shared out. At the conference, Chukwuma was appointed baggage officer, and his task included collecting stores, boxing, labeling, recording, and weighing them. I was embarkation officer, and my duties included proper loading and recording of stores and men of the company on the aircraft. Okafor, as the transport officer, was responsible for the transportation of equipment, stores, and men from the company station in Kaduna to the point of embarkation in Kano. The company commander gave in detail how he wanted each of us to carry out his duties. The conference ended and we dispersed. Chukwuma had reservations about the way the company commander wanted him to carry out his duties. He believed strongly that it could lead to confusion and loss of stores and equipment. He told me of his apprehension, and he made up his mind to rectify things by carrying out his duties slightly differently from what the commander had instructed. A few days later, the commander noted that his instructions were not being carried out to the letter. He summoned another conference of all officers, and without being specific, but with apparent displeasure, he warned against disobeying his instructions, as disobedience is a particularly serious offense in the army. I asked the commander if he was referring to any particular officer. He snapped back, "I'm not referring to you, and those I am referring to know themselves, and if they do not change, I will deal severely with them." The conference ended on that note. Chukwuma said to me afterwards, "You know he was referring to me, but I have finished the work the way I believed it should be done, and there is no need for change." That incident, early in the process of the company preparation for the Congo, soured the relationship between Chukwuma and the commander. But as was typical of Chukwuma, he had carried out his task most conscientiously and dutifully, if slightly differently from the way he had been instructed. We moved to Kano on 9th November 1960 to be airlifted to the Congo. By mid-November, the whole of B Company had arrived in the Congo, in Kindu, Kivu province. The company had barely settled down in Kindu when there was an information that some Congolese were going to cause a disturbance. What remained of the Mali troops whom were replacing could not be used to quell the anticipated disturbance because they had clashed with the Congolese troops. The task of maintaining peace and tranquility fell on our company. It was the first operation by the Nigerian troops in the Congo, so the commander's desire for and anxiety about our success was understandable. On the eve of the operation, Aguyi Ironsi, the commanding officer, and Malari, the officer in charge of B Company, disagreed on details of execution, especially as to when fire could be opened on the anticipated rioters and those causing disturbances. While Ironsi favored a delayed action to prevent civilian casualties if possible, Malari said he would carry out an early action to save the lives of his troop. Ironsi, not wanting to take the chance, relieved Malari of his command of B Company and handed over command to Captain Lagema. At about midnight on 16 November 1960, we were woken up to be briefed by Ironsi and our new company commander. Major Malari left for Nigeria the following morning without a farewell from any of us, as we were deployed for operations as early as 4 a.m. Nothing dramatic happened that day, and the operation was called off later in the afternoon. We all felt sorry for Major Malari leaving us, as we had started to get close to each other and formed a close-knit comradeship. Chukwuma remarked that evening, "It is a pity he had to leave us, even though I know that our being together might have cost me my career. He is soldierly, I like him, and I might have learned to work with him." Indeed, Chukwuma was already learning to work with Malari, as he had shown some remorse and had tendered an apology to Malari for what had happened when we were preparing to leave Nigeria. With the departure of Malari, life continued and we headed for our destination, Kasongo. The new company commander went on reconnaissance and Lieutenant David Okafor led the advance party. Chukwuma and I were left behind to prepare the company for the movement to Kasongo. Once again, Chukwuma took responsibility for bagging and I looked after transportation, which was to be by train. We had to purchase food items and other consumer materials from Kindu, as the company commander reported after his visit that there was virtually nothing that could be purchased in Kasongo. By noon on 22nd November 1960, our train departed for Kasongo. Our troops were intrigued to know that our train was moved by a wool-fired locomotive engine in contrast to coal-fired locomotive engines with which we were familiar in Nigeria. I explained to them the principle of the locomotive steam engine, whether fired by coal or wood. Our commander left by road and Chukwuma and I took the company by train on a slow and boring journey. We had to stop frequently to collect firewood along the way to fuel the engine. Chukwuma decided to relieve our boredom by working different games and songs for each compartment. The games and songs were changed regularly from one compartment to another, and some form of competition was introduced. We sang and played joyfully throughout the night until we arrived at Samba railway station the following morning at about 8. Lieutenant Okafo and a platoon remained here as a detachment. We disembarked, offloaded our stores, sorted them out into trucks and set out on the final leg of our journey to Kasongo along a bumpy and dusty 50 kilometers of road. The journey lasted 4 hours. We were met by our company commander and the local commander of the Congolese troops in our town. The local commander appeared a nice man and he offered to help and cooperate with us. Because of the general distrust and hatred for the Belgians, the Congolese troops loathed any white man. But since our company was completely Nigerianized, we had no immediate problem with the Congolese troops in Kasongo. We settled down fast, and of course there could not be many problems settling down in a small place like Kasongo, especially as we were fairly well prepared for the inadequacies of the small town. The second day after our arrival was market day, and Chukwuma went to the market while I made preparation for our first patrol outs the following day. Chukwuma came back to report that the only item he found in the market was fish. The first patrol of the company from Kasongo was a joint operation with the Congolese troops and it was commanded by me. It was to Wasula, some 40 kilometers from Kasongo. It was a whole day's affair, but we were well received by the local administrator who treated us to a sumptuous lunch of rice and fish. The villages along the road looked deserted, and we were told that the villagers were on their farms or fishing in the streams. We took time to familiarize ourselves with Kasongo and its inhabitants. We were pleasantly surprised to find that a number of Nigerians had been living in a place as remote as Kasongo before we got there. They had fully integrated with the local community and in spite of the turbulence of the country, went about their businesses as if nothing was happening. Coming face to face with such adventurous and enterprising Nigerians in such a faraway place, although in Africa, made a very lasting impression on us. We were struck by the apparent neglect of the Congolese by the Belgian colonial masters. Each town was divided into two quarters, one Belgian and the other African. In the African quarters were to be found shanty huts along narrow, bumpy and dusty streets without drainages. The Belgian quarters were, in contrast, modern in design and layout and had an abundant supply of amenities, which was why the Congolese quickly moved into these modern houses in almost all cities and towns when anti-Belgian protests began and the Belgians left. Throughout the country, roads were poorly developed, although one could get from one town to another by air transportation, which had been developed entirely for the benefits of the colonial masters and commercial houses. We talked and interacted with many Congolese, most of whom we found were intelligent, even though they hadn't had the benefits of Western education. As we moved round the towns and the countryside, we appreciated the depth of resentment of the Congolese for their colonial masters and the obvious reasons for such resentments. Whatever sympathy we had for the Congolese in their plight, we had to be even-handed as members of our international peacekeeping force. Ordinarily, the individual Congolese could not understand why we Nigerians should either be seen in the company of white members of the United Nations forces or be protecting the lives of white civilians in their different locations within our areas of responsibility. By 27th November, which was within a week of our arrival in Kasongo, Major Galloway, our battalion's second-in-command, visited us in the company of a priest, the paymaster, and a doctor, all British officers serving with the Nigerian army. They spent what was apparently an uneasy night in Kasongo. We were not sure how far the Congolese troops would go in giving expression to their anti-white feelings. Both Chukuma and myself had to keep vigil with our troops all night, as well as go on regular patrol to ensure that nothing went amiss. We knew that the Congolese troops were angered by the sight of our white visitors, and they felt that they could not rely on us. Their first action the following morning was their unilateral cancellation of the joint patrol billed for that day. We were, however, happy that our visitors left without any incidents after acquainting themselves with our problems and making money available to our troops. The spirit and morale of our troops soared after receiving their pay, even though the Congolese troops had embarked on an annoying and irritating harassment of our soldiers. We had to start afresh to cultivate the friendship of the Congolese troops and their local commander. We explained to them the composition of the Nigerian contingent and assured them of our faithfulness and cooperation. Jointly and severally, we visited the Congolese camp and the house of the local Congolese commander several times to re-establish their confidence in us. 3 days after our visitors left, the local commander visited us in the company of his wife. The wound appeared to be healing. Our company commander, who had by then been promoted to a major, supported our free fence mending actions with the Congolese troops, and he was regularly briefed. But since in rank and age he was by far senior to the Congolese local commander, who was in fact also junior in age and rank to most of us, he could not join in the fence mending. With our differences settled, we resumed the joint Nigerian-Congolese patrol early in December. At about the same time, the governor of Kivu province, Monsieur Mirinhu, visited our area of operation, and we joined the local population to receive him. Before we left Nigeria, we had been advised to learn enough French as a means of communication with the Congolese. As soon as we got to Kasongo, we decided to also pick up some Lingala and Swahili, two major languages widely spoken in the Congo. We gave the learning of the local languages very serious attention. On the last evening of the provincial governor's visit to Kasongo, he was entertained with a friendly football match between the Nigerian troops and the Kasongo team. Nigerian troops lost 3-1. The same evening, all the Nigerian officers met the governor at a dinner party in the house of the local Congolese commander. We were lavishly entertained by our Congolese hosts, while Chukuma and I made great efforts to converse with the governor and his team in broken Swahili or Lingala. Unfortunately, we could hardly make ourselves understood. In spite of our obvious difficulties in communicating, they were delighted by the efforts we had made to learn their languages within such a short time. Most of our discussions centered on the neglect of the Congolese by the Belgian colonial masters and the challenge then facing the emerging African nations. Before the governor left Kasongo on 5th December, he did something that disturbed Chukuma and me, and we talked about it for quite a while afterwards. Before he arrived, the official working time was 7 in the morning to 12 noon and from 2 to 5 in the evening. But after the governor's visit, the working hours were reduced by 1 hour and the work week from 6 to 5 days. The workers were overjoyed and sang his praise. We were, of course, disappointed by the decision of the governor to reduce the working hours, as we felt that if the Belgians built their national prosperity from the sweat of the Congolese, on attaining independence, could not do any less for their own immediate and future national prosperity and well-being. Although confidence was by now fairly established between us and the Congolese troops in Kasongo, there was always the lingering mutual suspicion between United Nations troops on outpost patrols and the Congolese troops stationed in such outposts. This was due substantially to very poor, almost non-existent communication between Congolese troops and their headquarters. When our company commander, Major Lagama, went to Namoya and failed to return on schedule, Chukuma lost no time in taking a section of his men to look for him. In less than half an hour, they all came back hale and hearty. The road had been worse than anticipated and the journey had taken longer than envisaged. Our military operations in Kasongo consisted in confidence building, removal of suspicion, and dispelling rumors which came in many and varied forms. One day it was rumored that Lumumba's supporters were arresting all whites and killing them. Another day it was that the Katangese forces were attacking Kivu province. It went on like that, nerve-wrackingly and endlessly. We moved from one tense situation to another. On 18 December, we learned of an operation by Nigerian troops in Bukavu to release the white staff of international organizations working there from the prisons where the Congolese troops had put them after all peaceful negotiations with the Congolese captors had failed. The operation led to casualties on both sides and soured relations well beyond Bukavu between Congolese troops and the Nigerian contingent. Because of this incident, the Congolese soldiers in Kasongo immediately adopted a policy of non-fraternization with us. Our troops in Kasongo and Samba also suffered minor harassment from Congolese troops stationed in Stanleyville, Kisangani. The general officer commanding of the Nigerian Army, Major General Everald, visited the Nigerian contingent in the Congo in the middle of January 1961. At that time, the Nigerian contingent consisted of 2 battalions, the 3rd and 5th battalions of the Nigerian Army. Our company had hardly settled down in Bukavu when General Everald's visit took place. He had a conference with all the officers of the battalion, and after which he visited company locations. The officers of the company stood before their platoons for the traditional inspection and address. After his inspection, the general commended the conduct and operational performance of the battalion as a whole and our company in particular. He announced a period of 6 months tour of duty in the Congo and the approval of Nigerian Overseas Allowance by the government in addition to the United Nations allowance. Everybody's face glowed with the good news. Presumably hoping that no questions would be forthcoming from the troops, the general asked for questions. Nobody asked any question except a soldier in my platoon who raised his hand. I was petrified because I did not know what the soldier was going to say. The company sergeant major coughed and cleared his throat suggestively to hush the soldier, but it was all to no avail. I winked and frowned to silence the soldier without any results. When he was called upon to speak, the soldier said, "Sir, we have had too much frozen fish, poultry and meat with potatoes and rice. Can we have gari and egusi soup?" General Everard answered without hesitation, "Nigerian diet will now be part of your menu." From then on, we had a mixture of European and Nigerian food. Although the soldier's question was not met with the anticipated rebuff, he was warned to inform his superiors in future before asking a question or visiting senior officers. Chukuma, however, maintained that the soldier should be given a medal for his behavior. Major General Everald's visit raised the morale of the troops, but it contributed little, if anything, to soothe the strained relationship between Nigerian and Congolese troops. 2 days after General Everald's visit, the Supreme Commander of United Nations forces in the Congo visited our battalion. He addressed the officers and commended the battalion. Chukuma and I had by now grown to detest the nightly social programs in the mess, which consisted of heavy drinking and socializing among all shades of people. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Aguyi Ironsi, was particularly noted for his whiskey and his unguarded conversation afterwards. On one occasion, he said to me, "You are a good officer, but I don't like you because you don't drink. You will always be too sober." He said similar words to Chukuma on another occasion, and Chukuma did not like it. But 2 years later, when he became the commander of United Nations forces in the Congo, Ironsi requested for me as his military assistant for the same reason of always being sober. The Army headquarters could not release me because of my new career in the Army Corps of Engineers. One day, Chukuma came back from a patrol and said he believed strongly that Lumumba would be killed and we might get entangled in the ensuing chaos and disturbance, to the extent that our 6-month tour of duty in the Congo might be extended to 12 months. 3 days later, we received the news that Lumumba was killed when he allegedly tried to escape from custody. The atmosphere in Bukavu was charged, and we had to intensify patrols within the town and throughout the districts. No serious incidents accompanied the news of Lumumba's death in our area of operation. Later, I asked Chukuma how he came to know that Lumumba would be killed. He said, "It is through a flash of inspiration." On the other hand, it could have been through a logical deduction from the happenings in the Congo and the world at the time. But whatever it was a clear indication of the clarity of Chukuma's perception. We continued to make friends in the Congo while carrying out training between patrol duties. By April, we had started packing and thinning out of the Congo. As young officers, the Congo operation had tremendous implications and made deep impressions on our lives and military careers. At that early stage in our military careers, we were able to compare the effects of colonization by two colonial powers in two countries of Africa, Nigeria and the Congo. There were only shades of difference in the methods employed. By and large, both Britain and Belgium were only interested in exploiting the colonies for the development of their home countries. Chukuma was occasionally angered by the actions and attitudes of the Congolese, such as drinking in the morning, loitering about, and general signs of laziness. A Congolese friend tried to explain that frustration, underemployment, and unemployment usually led to this. Chukuma was not impressed by the explanation, and he said so. Our Congo experience, however, heightened our Pan-African fervor. We realized that an Africa divided by outsiders and within itself would remain perpetually exploited, suppressed, and backwards. One day in our discussion, Chukuma declared to me that working for Africa was more important to him than getting married. And he was particularly unhappy when, on some occasion, he noticed the lack of sufficient cooperation between the companies within our battalion. Some company commanders behaved as if the whole exercise was a competition to win a medal. He hated selfishness and an uncooperative attitude, and he did not hesitate to tell one such company commander to his face. Normally a bit rash and impulsive, Chukuma confessed to me that he learnt a bit of patience and tolerance in the Congo. For the return journey to Nigeria, each of us assumed the task that had been given on our way in. Chukuma was packing our stores and preparing them for transportation. I was loading and seeing to the safety of stores and men for movement by air. And having had the experience on the incoming journeys, we had no problem on our return journey. 3 days before we departed from Bukavu, Chukuma decided that we should visit all our Congolese friends, military and civilian, and bid them farewell with parting gifts of drinks, cigarettes, and other items purchased from the United Nations Forces stores. Most of them appreciated our gesture, and they felt sad that we were leaving. The battalion held a big party to bid farewell to the Congolese military and civilian authorities. It was very well attended. 1 or 2 officers had too much to drink and they showed it. Chukuma complained and moaned throughout the night about disgraceful conduct. He suggested to our company commander that our company should hold its own party. The company agreed, and he made Chukuma the organizer of the party. As should be expected, Chukuma left no stone unturned to make the party a great success. He said to me later, "We must leave a good taste in the mouth of our hosts." On arriving home in May 1961, we cleaned our equipment and returned them to the stores. Then we took a short holiday after our troops had been granted leave. Chukuma decided that he was going to spend his leave visiting Dahomey, Togo, and Ghana in his car. He had an accident on the way. Fortunately, he sustained no injuries, although the car was a complete write-off. He had expected that his insurance company would pay for the repairs, but he learned to his disappointment that the insurance did not cover him for the length of time he stayed outside Nigeria. He learned a good lesson from that. By the time we resumed duties after our disembarkation leave, we had both been posted out of 5th Battalion. Chukuma had been posted to Army Training Depot Zaria as a training officer. He was there for about 6 months before he got posted to the Army headquarters in Lagos to take charge of the military intelligence section. Thus, he achieved one of his ambitions as a cadet. He was the first Nigerian Army officer to work in that section, and he helped to establish it. I was posted to the Army Engineering Corps based in Kaduna, the only unit of its kind in the Nigerian Army at the time, and that too was my choice. I was the second Nigerian officer to be so posted, the first being Captain Mike Okwechime. With our different postings, Chukwuma and I became physically separated, but we maintained regular communication. While he was in Zaria, we exchanged visits weekly. Chukwuma had great prospects in his new job and was optimistic about the future of the Nigerian army and the young nation. He never ceased talking about the potential greatness of Nigeria, which he said lay dormant, crying for realization. Without formal training in intelligence work, he threw himself completely into the job, reading any relevant material he could lay his hands on. He attended 2 courses at the British School of Military Intelligence between April and July 1962. By this time, he had been promoted to the rank of captain. The first report on him said he was an alert and interested student
with a good command of English who was not afraid to ask questions. His inclination is to the cloak and dagger side of counterintelligence, but he now has a good understanding of protective security practice as well as the general principle of counterintelligence. He is cheerful, a good mixer, and anxious to learn. With experience, and provided that he does not let his enthusiasm run away from him, he should make a good counterintelligence officer.
The second report for a much higher course was just as good.
He speaks and understands English very well. As a junior officer with limited experience, much of this course was at too high a level for him to understand it fully. He has, however, learned the principles of intelligence staff work as practiced in the British Army. He must beware of applying principles wholesale to situations for which they were not designed, and he must also beware of twisting the interpretations of facts to suit his own preconceived ideas. However, much of the work he produced on the course showed promise. He worked hard throughout and deserves congratulation for the ready way in which he mixed with the many nationalities represented.
From the 2 reports, it was clear by that time that Chukwuma, the loner at school, had turned out to be an extrovert and a good mixer. His conscientiousness and hard work also came to the fore. For most of 1962 and 1963, I was at the British School of Military Engineering, and Chukwuma saw me briefly before he returned home in July 1962. The first major task he faced on returning home was taking part in the investigation of the treasonable felony case against Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the action group leader, and some members of his party. At the end of that investigation, Chukwuma had some scathing remarks to make about our national security and about those who were being investigated. If he had his way, he said his treatment of the whole case would have been different. However, he was determined to improve on his own aspect of security, military intelligence. He did his best within the limits of the resources available to establish and develop the military intelligence section of the Army into a credible institution. Inevitably, he stepped on the toes of some officers who did not take kindly to his zeal and attempts to curtail laxity in the office. He even had a slight brush with the Minister of State for the Army, Alhaji Galadima Bida. Chukwuma went ahead with his job as he believed he should. His enthusiasm and ideas were probably too much for some senior officers, and he was posted to the Nigerian Military Training College in Kaduna. When we were in the Congo, we had often talked about savings and investments. I had bought a piece of land through the help of a cousin of mine in Ibadan. Chukwuma had always maintained that investment in property in Lagos was better than anywhere else in the country. When we returned from the Congo, I got a plot of land transferred to me by my friend in Kaduna. Chukwuma believed that it was an unwise investment and he was determined to prove me wrong. So when he returned from his course in 1962 and the Lagos Executive Development Board (LEDB) advertised for prospective buyers of plots in its layout in Surulere, Chukwuma applied not only for himself but for me with non-refundable deposits of £5 each. He forwarded to me in the United Kingdom a copy of the application he placed on my behalf. I was pleasantly surprised and immediately I bought postal orders and sent them to him. He returned the postal orders with a note in which he said, "I will let you know when I need it." By the time I returned to Nigeria in August 1963, Chukwuma had established a good reputation for himself with his colleagues at the army headquarters and elsewhere in Lagos. His determination, affable character, good-naturedness, open-mindedness, fearlessness, and honesty also made him a favorite with junior officers. On the other hand, most senior officers regarded him as brash, meddlesome, and a radical. However, in a report in July 1963, Lieutenant Colonel H.M. Nzeogwu said,
Chukwuma K. Nzeogwu have been known to me since 1960 when both of us served with 5 Queen Zone Nigeria Regiment in the Congo, and he has been directly under me since February 1963. He has carried out his duty with diligence. Nzeogwu is resourceful, calm, and calculated, and has capacity for details. He has made remarkable improvements in his social outlook and now shows good sign of maturity. Nzeogwu is a devout Christian who is highly respected by his fellow officers. His bearing both during and off duty is excellent. A keen, young, and promising officer who should do well on the army.
As I was settling down in Kaduna, Chukwuma was sent on an attachment to the UK. It was at this time that the LEDB wrote allocating us building plots at Animashaun Estate. In the meantime, when nothing was heard from the LEDB for nearly a year, Chukwuma paid for a plot of land at Ibezim or Biajulu, also in Surulere, which he purchased from a third party at 50% more than the selling price of the LEDB plots. When the direct allocation from the LEDB came, I did not have enough money to pay for both of us, so I decided that the allocation should be forfeited, and I wrote to tell Chukwuma accordingly. He was furious on receiving my letter, and he wrote back to say that although he could not afford the second plot of land then, I should not lose the opportunity, adding that if necessary, he would scrape everything he had left to assist me. On receipt of his letter, I went on to make the purchase arrangements. The plot allocated to me turned out not to be too far from his own plot. He used to joke that we could shout across the street to each other. In September 1964, I took a short leave, most of which I devoted to helping with the construction of the building on Chukwuma's plot. I went to Lagos to buy materials and to supervise actual construction of the house. He wanted pipe-borne water provided for the site. But when he went to the office of the water people in uniform, one of the staff said to Chukwuma, "Don't do us this soldier business. Give us something to buy beer." Chukwuma gave them £10, but as far as I know, that incident haunted him for a long time. He was not sure whether what he did was right or wrong, whether it was a bribe, a tip, or a gift. When I teased him about it, he was uncomfortable. He abhorred corruption and dishonesty. Sometime in 1963, Chukwuma was looking for schools for his sister, Philomena, and his brother, Peter, and he decided to visit Mayflower School, Ikene, Tai Solarin's school. He was impressed by the school and was immediately sold on Solarin's unorthodox and practical approach to education. They struck a happy and harmonious friendship which Tai cherished even after Chukwuma's death. By the time Chukwuma left Lagos to attend the Indian Staff College in 1964, he had seen and heard so much within the military and political life of the country that his hopes and expectations as a young officer had started to give way to disenchantment, bordering on disillusion. His work in military intelligence had probably exposed him more than any other officer to the virtues and vices of the military and political leadership. He could not help but talk about these things, especially among his military and civilian friends. He had also by that time taken great interest in reading about Ioka, the Greek underground movement in Cyprus, and Archbishop Makarios, the Malayan insurgency and uprising, Gyap's People War and People's Army, the guerrilla activities in Algeria and in Portuguese African territories, and was convinced of the necessity to fight to liberate the whole of Africa. The Indian Staff College whetted his appetite for reading, and he read widely. He was determined to do well at the Staff College for two main reasons: to set a very good example and make a good impression on the Indians as one of the first 3 Nigerian officers to attend the course, and to ensure that he derived the maximum benefit from the program. His reports talked of his active participation in all aspects of the course. He confessed to me later that it was in India that he could say that he fell in love for the first time. He was attracted to the daughter of the commandant of the college. Of course, he did not follow it up, and it petered out after he left India. He told me of a second occasion when he was attracted to a woman who looked after him during one of his holidays in the UK. Again, he was probably too shy or too preoccupied with thoughts and plans for the future to follow up with any of the relationships. His general lack of interest in women was understandably a source of concern to his mother. By the end of 1964, when he returned from India and was posted to the Nigerian Military Training College NMTC Kaduna, he had a new optimism about Nigeria. Colonel R.A. Shodende, the commandant of the NMTC, wrote this report in February 1965.
Major Nzeogwu took over as the college chief instructor last December. His main duties have been on planning and supervision of training. He has also acted as commandant for a short period. So far, he has carried out all these duties successfully and he's settling down well. Nzeogwu is keen and he devotes a lot of time to work. He has many good and up-to-date ideas acquired from his overseas courses and attachments. He is inclined to be easily upset when the views of others are contrary to his own, particularly officers of his own rank. Also, in his enthusiasm, he has a tendency to take too much for granted. I feel this is due to lack of experience. He has the capacity for hard work and details. He is reliable and should be very successful either on the staff or at regimental employment with more experiences.
He was given A grading. We lived under the same roof again in our discussions. He was still optimistic that the national military and civil leadership would mend. After the 1964 general elections, however, he requested that the corrugated iron sheets used for polling booths around Kaduna be made into temporary barracks for soldiers at the training camp in Kachia, and he prophetically remarked that there would not be another general election for a long time to come. Was the coup perhaps on his mind already,